You're live.
So we'll be going through sessions. Welcome to our second session. We'll be going through pieces such as hands-on, the bikini version 3.2 is I think what Caroline put on there, but we'll be going through hands-on. We'll be going through yes and no but, and we'll be going through LARP out loud. It will be a mobile session, so the video might get a little weird at times, just warning Emily, since she's been gracious enough to run video for us today. But as we get started on this piece, what I want us to think about is in the movie version of whatever we are doing when we are role-playing, what is the scale of the particular scene that we are doing, okay? And that'll get to be really important when we get to the LARP out loud part. Is it a soliloquy? Is it a two-person piece? Is it a larger, wide screen, or is it a full-on group, Avengers style, everyone, Civil War kind of thing, where they're all fighting each other, or a Star Wars mega battle? And what does that really look like in our movie? Because that will determine how we LARP out loud and how we make those pieces, and that might look different. And none of them are inappropriate, but some might be more appropriate depending on what the intent is for what we're trying to get across. All right, so I need a specifically female volunteer. Stephanie, that would be great, to come up and let's talk about hands-on and hands-off. So I'm going to start with the kind of less interesting but super mega important rules portions, and then we're going to roll into the more touchy-feely stuff of, not figuratively, not literally, of our role-play skills. So in this case, we're talking about hands-on, hands-off. And what is hands-on is our way in which we have verbalized consent. There is no implied consent ever, really even in real life. Consent has to be a positive action. Oftentimes it is taken as an implied action, but that's not really consent. That's just doing something and not being told no. That's not really consent, right?
Right. Yep.
We are actively modeling proper consent behavior at Brittanis, and so it has to be a yes. Hands-on is an okay piece. Hands-off is no. That can change at any time, so we'll go through this quickly. Minors cannot consent, and the areas where even if you have consent are still off limits, okay? So in this particular case, let's have, and you can pick how Chris is going to be our actor, the initiator in this case. Stephanie, you get to choose how you want. Let's see what hands-on, hands-off looks like.
Hands-on?
Hands-on. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good,
All right.
thank you.
But what if Stephanie was instead feeling ill? Try this again.
Hands-on?
No, no, thank you. Hands off.
Okay.
All right, so that's fairly simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Although there was a hug, that can be an entirely different thing, but for the most part, most people will add on. It's not part of the game culture to say, "Can I give you a hug?" You want to, for the most part, ask that. It's not in the rules, but it's a pleasantry to add on to that to make sure that it's okay to not just hands-on, because all of the area, if you imagine a 1920s single-piece swimsuit, are explicitly hands-off all the time, regardless. So, and that isn't gender-specific. It isn't not
It's
gender.
the same space on me from here
Regardless.
to here as it is on Stephanie.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
And it doesn't matter if you're male, female, non-binary, whatever you prefer to have as your gender identity, it just doesn't matter. It's just, these areas are not okay. So that's self-explanatory at that point. Yes, Jason?
So that's why the additional clarification for the hug, because
Because you
by
might technically
necessity-
be violated. You might come into violation of that. It is, I personally would say, is it okay to give you a hug as well? Even though I've called hands-on, I would do that as a pleasantry. Right, because it also might be that it's okay to be hands-on, but you
But I
know,
don't want a hug.
but I don't want a hug. I'm not a huggy person,
Hands on.
Hands on.
right? If anyone has seen the thing going around with, not too long ago on Facebook on how to avoid a hug, because all the different motions and combat that you can have to avoid a hug, that's not what we're talking about.
And you can get similar role play or similar physical role play even on a hands off. Stephanie told me hands off. I still want to hug Stephanie, so I hug Stephanie. In game, we just hugged. That's cool. But I didn't feel the need to touch her because she said hands off. And that's okay.
You had a clarification.
I just said that's a good
Oh,
clarification.
that's, okay. Also, there are many touch effects that are in-game that require you to touch. There is no actual requirement in Brittanis. Because Stephanie loves this particular prop,
Do not
I'm gonna
want.
give you a little background. So, Stephanie, I'm not gonna make you do this, I'm just gonna share.
Thank you.
Stephanie has a problem with ovipositors. This is he wants to, yeah, it's very friendly. It's also what we call the ooh in our staff meetings, because I have one of those as well. But let's use a packet instead, right? And,
Packet?
and so if there's that's a great packet as well. So we've got a couple of them here.
I like that one.
There you go, there's your mouse. There's your mouse. So if there is, for example, let's say that Stephanie's character has been injured and needs healing, but she has explicitly given hands off previously. In fact, the status is currently unknown. Let's try this part. So she's unconscious.
Oh,
Go.
Stephanie, in Sooth, are you well?
In sooth, I am well.
Hands on.
Hands on.
Hands on. Okay. So in this instance, heal 2 by the Evermaiden. Sorry, I can't do that because that would be within the area. Heal 2 by the Evermaiden.
And that would work.
Okay.
What if the result was hands off?
So, hands on.
Hands off.
All right, I'm going to touch you with a packet to heal you. Heal 2 by the Evermaiden.
So anything that can be role played by a physical touch can be role played through the use of a packet. Yes, Brad?
I think that if someone does say hands off, the clarification of what you're going to do needs to be expressed.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
hands off could be, don't get inside my bubble even with the packet. So
It absolutely
the clarification of, I'm going to touch you with the packet to heal you, still gives the opportunity to say, no, thank you, and then you could do the hovering.
That's a wonderful clarification, and again, much like my idea with the
Sure.
hugs, it's not explicitly in the rules, but it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I want to share that. So let's say you do not have a packet. That was a question that came from
So
last
something
time.
came up last time is, so I don't have a packet. Now I have 2 options here. I can ask someone around me if you have a packet. In this case, I know that Stephanie has a packet, but let's say that she doesn't. There's no packets available. Stephanie has established hands off. I still need to heal Stephanie. I have a LARP safe weapon, okay? This is by safety. This can be used to touch another player. I can use this in place of, just like I would use a packet, to provide the contact for a touch effect,
In this case.
but while
only.
maintaining hands off, okay? So in the instance that you don't have a packet, a safe for contact implement would also be an acceptable option.
Sure. Jason,
Would
go
you
ahead.
want to use the handle so you're not beating them to heal them?
Yes, yeah, that would be a polite way to go about it. I'm gonna go into a wild hypothetical here, but let's say for the moment that Chris was trying to heal me and that I was hands off, but unbeknownst to him, I had some sort of contagious thing on me and which like, you shouldn't be touching me, right? But I can play, but if you don't wanna do it, let him use something else or come close to it or whatever, so.
Right, so if I
Hands
say
off.
hands off,
Go
or I
ahead.
say hands on,
Hands off,
okay, and I go, I'm gonna touch you so I can heal you. I go like that, and I heal him.
we're good,
Or,
right?
if, I use the instance of Mike has shingles.
Sure.
I don't
It's
want that
gonna be
on my weapon
physically-
at all.
Or it's gonna be physically painful to me as well, right?
So when he says hands off, he can say, don't touch me.
Don't touch me.
And we
Okay.
go like this. And I'm not touching him, I'm not getting close to touching him, I'm maintaining distance while making it obvious to a casual observer that there is a contact going on.
We're doing our best to
From a
try
game
to
perspective.
follow the rules as best we can with the consent in place.
And it meets the rule standard because the whole
Sure.
point is you gotta be close enough to touch them and, I mean, that's
That's the limitation of the rules, so
Sure.
you're doing
Yes,
that.
Brad, you had a question?
Why can't that just be the rule? Like, if I say hands off, why can't it just be, why do we have to have so many?
That's a great question. I can take that back. We can find out and see if
Because
that's
to me-
an idea that.
Because
needs
to
be
me,
changed.
I might be sick, don't wanna be touched, I might.
Right.
And you can touch me with a spell packet, but I might just be, I'm having a lot of bleed because I feel creeped out with people in my space.
Right, I'm gonna do a yes and there doesn't have to be a reason why you say hands off.
Sure.
You do not need to explain yourself.
It just seems to me it seems that we're hands on, yes, okay, I can touch you. Hands off, no, okay, I'm not even gonna get in your bubble, I'm just gonna have my hand above you, you're healed, you know,
Sure.
you don't feel my touch, you
Sure,
know?
and I'm gonna intentionally not answer that, but I'm gonna at least give you a feel for that. Why I'm not gonna answer it is, it might be part of the core rules that come from, that tell us how to do that, in which case we have to follow the accelerant way of doing those things. We may not be in control of that. On the other hand, if it's a piece that we can take and modify and run with, we might be able to do that. So it's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's something we should certainly bookmark and bring back with, but.
I'm just envisioning
Also
the-
explicitly, because I don't know, why I'm not gonna answer.
I just envision the different levels coming out.
I think I
as a
saw two
single-
hands, who's,
I saw Mary.
okay, Mary, go ahead.
So, piggybacking on what Brad said, would it be acceptable, or are we gonna get a clarification at some point maybe, to just say, if someone says hands off, say, I'm close enough for a touch effect, and announce that, and then?
We're
And kind of
definitely
gesture
not going to be
without
answering
being
that now.
like,
What I
"I'm in
would
your
suggest is either from we may be watching our videos to do this, but you actively that are here asking those questions when you get your surveys and have things that
Okay.
you might want to add to it, I'd absolutely be putting those ideas into the surveys. Yes, that's,
There's a lot of.
yeah, there's a lot of that.
Sign your waiver.
There's absolutely a lot of that. So let's move off of hands-on, hands-off. Thank you, Stephanie, appreciate it.
Thank you.
for allowing us to-
Yay!
All right, we're gonna go into yes and no but. So interestingly, this was the exact moment that I joined Brittanis 3 years ago, you two were still on staff or were just about to come off of staff when I did this. And Chris,
Oliver?
Oliver?
no, his kid's really sick. We had a person come in and actually teach some of this to us. talking
Oh,
about-
big guy.
we were at Arts Asylum.
Yes, over at the Arts Asylum was my very first moment, so I'm sharing that piece with you. We've got a lot to cover, so I'm not gonna get too long into it. But this is a piece that's near and dear to my heart, is we're gonna talk about yes and. We're actually gonna get you up here in just a moment. We're gonna talk through pieces, but let's talk through yes and no but, so we can kind of get a feel for what we wanna be doing with it. Whenever we are role playing, as a community, we want to be, it's not just being part of being excellent to each other, it's part of continuing the story. So if there is a piece that comes up to be role played with, if we take it in, absorb it, and move on, it dies, right? But if we add to it or divert it and move it, the story continues. So we want to be using things such as yes and we'll practice this here in a moment, in order to further our story. The same way, no but is, you will find, is much more difficult to further the story. We wanted to divert the story without stopping it. So a great piece that my wife and daughter had over here in the first session was, is this a magical ring? And my daughter said, no. Well, that doesn't do a whole lot. No, but it has the Duke's signet on it, or the Duke's sigil on it. That might be, that can further role play, right? So we're gonna practice how to do yes and no but, and we'll take about 10 to 15 minutes before we roll over to LARP Out Loud, where we're gonna practice it in a number of different ways. So I need, yes, go ahead.
From a storytelling perspective, are there times when no is appropriate to the story? To use your example, instead of going no but, it's the Duke's signet, would no, it's a forgery, would that count as no but, or would that still be a no?
That in a way is a no but.
It's a single but.
It's not the thing that you thought it was, but it's something entirely
That's a
different.
no and.
That's kind of is a no and. It's a no and. But the overall concept here is to continue to further the role play. Don't let the role play die by our actions when we're trying to do that. Find a way to keep the story going, okay? So I'm gonna do this a little differently. Last time we had 2 groups. This time I'm gonna want 2 groups, so I'm gonna want you coming up, one group here in a line, one group here in a line, and we'll play off of each other and then tag off.
I'm not understanding.
That's okay. If you want to watch and observe, I think you'll get the same piece, Jason. I think it's okay.
Are we gonna, is this related to, isn't it true that? Is
It's,
that muddling
it's a
things?
similar argument, but what we're gonna do here is I'm going to give a situation, and the 2 people that are up front will continue until they feel like they don't have a piece to contribute, until the story dies. And then they'll peel off, the next person will jump up and try to continue the discussion.
Before we get there, I'm gonna address that. So what Andy asked was, does this relate or apply to, isn't it true that? Isn't it true that is a code phrase that was come up with during chapter 1. If I want to add information about Baldwin. So I'm talking to Baldwin, I say, Baldwin, isn't it true that your uncle was just tried for poaching?
Oh, yes, and I heard he was found guilty.
Okay.
So what I've done is I have presented a piece of information that I think would be cool about Brad's character. And then given him the opportunity to decide,
To own it
is
or
that
not.
true? Am I comfortable with that? And where do I want to take it?
So you could also say, no, you must be mistaken.
No, but that might have been Jonathan's uncle.
Right.
Right, so what that is essentially an initiator to role play, right? It's starting a scene.
Yep.
Okay, in this case, I'm gonna give you a scene to start out from, and that's a great way to do it when we're in the field. I think it's awesome. But what we're gonna do is, so for example, the king has arrived, and your head of house is missing. Okay? You got it in your mind? What's that? Yeah. So the king is right, and you can choose whether or not you are the king or whether you're a messenger or whatever it might be. 3, 2, 1, go.
My liege has arrived, but I don't see your head of house.
Oh, yes. He's here. I think that he is actually with Jonathan over there in the court. Let me go grab him. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, go on. All right, so let's give us a piece here. So that created a scene, it moved things along, but the role play died. And that's a great, perfectly fine piece to do. Let's try to actively use, let's get kind of like you do with consent games, with hands on, hands off. Let's actively use yes and then a phrase afterwards, and then we can create a piece off of that. This time, a fae here has just appeared in the path in front of you. All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
Faye? No but.
That's all right. Peel off. Mary, get in front. Get.
The next person.
Yes, and how are you this fine day?
Oh, I am excellent. Well, is there any place that I might find mischief this day?
Oh,
Yes, and-
no,
Yes.
Oh,
but I think that if you tried the next town over.
I will do that. While I do that, though, talk with Peas Blossom.
Hello, how are you?
I am well. And where has the king gone? I would like to insert myself into his court.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like a really great idea, and I would love to help you with that, but I'm gonna pass that on.
So,
Have you found the king?
I can totally help you with that. I just need something from you, a reciprocity to get you into the king's court there.
No, but he might be able to.
So you've just been sold to me.
But I would like to offer you a wonderful large ogre that has recently shown up. He's wonderful at a great many things, including looking down on short people and talking to them and having kings for lunch.
Yeah, sent the 2-for-1 sale.
Great. I know just the guy who can set you up in what you're gonna do. These guys attacked me on the road.
Fantastic. Okay, all right, let's stop that for a moment. That was great role play. That was a great example of yes and no but. Let's sit down for just a real quick second. And as I know several of us are very sensitive to this. And let's talk about the yes and, let's talk about the no but. Yes and feels like it's a little easier to use to keep things moving, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But no but is appropriate. No but, as long as it's not used in negation and stop, is quite all right. It's perfectly fine to use.
No, but it's more of an advanced technique.
It's a redirect more than anything else, right? It's
like, look over there.
it's a different tool than yes and. Yes and is like a plus sign. I'm going to do this and I'm going to keep going on. Stephanie, you had a question or a comment?
When Megan Olvera was playing Nirka, and Nirka was convinced that she was going to lay an egg.
Oh, that's a great example.
That is a definite example of no but. Lady Blackwood sat down with her, and Leoness, of course, being on the cutting edge of science and technology, had a telling her exactly this was an egg and this was sperm and you were fertilized, and she's like, no, there is an egg inside of me, and she would not be budged. And people were getting upset about this. Well, she's shutting down my role play. No, but she's offering you alternate ways to interact with her character.
So when the egg
hiding
comes,
an egg under her leg.
She laid that egg.
no.
Or Baldwin put it there, whatever.
So in that case, there was a no but. It was a no, but let's make a nest for when the baby's here, and let's go do that. And so it actually still was able to be additive role play. It was just a slight redirect off of what was very hard to work with into something that was much more palatable. Yes?
I understand she's semi NPC, PC.
But she was a PC.
PC,
She was
okay.
full out PC.
So if you feel like that person's shutting down your role play, haven't you essentially just admitted that you're not participating in their role play?
I guess in a way it could be considered to be that might be the way. And if we think about how we're going to go about it, it might be a subject that you either aren't caught on fire on or whatnot, but you don't want to just, stomp all over their fun. We want to find a way in which we can engage that, and maybe, as several of you did in this exercise, disengage from, oh, this is making me super uncomfortable. What Andy did would totally have been what Bozar said. Oh, there's a fae. Oh, great.
That was half a cornerstone did that.
Right. There's a fae over here. Yes, Jason.
Can yes and no but also not just be used for role play, but information conveyance?
Of course. Yes.
For the oh look, there's a fae. Yes, and did you know that they cannot lie? Or should I interact with this fae? No, not unless you know how to negotiate with them, so you don't lose everything.
So that was a no unless, which would be an advanced thing. Yeah. But you're still furthering the story in that case. No, I wouldn't interact with the fae, but if you felt like you really needed to, you might want to take these things into consideration and start laying those out and say, good luck to you. Whatever it might be. Yes, Derek.
I wanted to compliment you on living this one, because I remember coming to you in the middle of Cornerstone, shouting across the camp, Bozarth, I need to summon the spirit of Brittanis right now. How do we do that? Yeah. And what?
Right, and so from role-playing that perspective, and this is a great segue, so thank you. We'll roll over into a concept called LARP Out Loud, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit, is that you created the scene, you set the scene large, and then we brought it, the camera zoomed in on the two of us, and I had to imagine, what do I want to impart to him that isn't going to just say no? Right. Because I absolutely want to say no in this moment. I don't want him summoning the fae, or the fae of Cornerstone of Brittanis, the concept of Brittanis. No way, this is a bad idea. But instead I go, well, if you wanted to go about this, first let's talk about, do you have a lot of treats? Do you have lots of offerings? Because as soon as you do this, you're going to be having a conversation and it's going to be barter, whether you like it or not. You know, so what do you want to do? Yes, Brad.
Just to kind of piggyback on this, continuing the role play, something we do in the classroom as teachers, a lot of times students make comments or suggestions that are very inappropriate.
Sure.
The way we continue teaching is we start off with saying, that's very interesting.
Sure.
And then the next thing we say is, why did you say that? Why did you do that? What makes you think that?
Right.
And that allows them to also, well, you get that information, why does he want to summon the
Right,
bat,
because
you
the
know?
overall concern
And you're still
here-
role playing.
The thought is still the same from what Brad's talking about. You don't want to quash the action of speaking up, of starting the role play, or of asking a question. You don't want to tell that kid, stop asking me questions. That's awful.
Bozarth wasn't the one who said it. I did hear about 6 different people. Why?
Right. Why? Right, but even that kind of interaction furthers the role play.
So the wrong answer would have been, no, that's a dumb idea.
And walk the other way.
And walk away. I mean,
And walk the other way.
Shut it down.
No.
Well, it'd
Yes,
have
you
been
just-
just as wrong to say, yes, brilliant, do that, and then walk away.
Right, or go ahead, say it
No,
again.
you have fun with that.
Yeah, exactly. You've done the same thing. In that case, it's not a negation. It's a, sure, but I'm not interested in that. And, but similar situation, I'm gonna move off of this so we can get on to the other part. That'll give us a little bit of time for LARP Out Loud, is you still wanna be true to your own character at the same time. And in that experience, Bozarth wasn't going to go out of his way to show our poor Brittanis Pope now, how to do this. He was going to try to make it as difficult as possible, because that's the thing he doesn't want to do. You can have conflict and still be yes and. You can absolutely have conflict and be yes and. Are we fairly confident, fairly good with where we are for yes and, no but?
Yep.
The one thing I want to say on the no but is it can't just be negation. It has to be redirection.
Redirect, don't dismiss.
Don't dismiss. Okay. All right, let's talk about LARP Out Loud. So I have a piece here. This is,
Ladies.
here we go. Decorum. All right. All right, so you get the idea here. So if a tree falls in the forest, do we care? Well, did it happen? Sure it happened. But did anybody know about it? Maybe not. Till you come across it, whatever. Role play can be the same way. And so a scene example that I have is that the Brittanis Wonderful Property was my very first in-game event, which was a couple of months after this character development event 3 years ago. I got to go out, and after a long night of role play, got to experience sunrise at the Brittanis property, which is beautiful. And it was a beautiful morning. It was idyllic. It was very, very wonderful. And I was in full Bozarth mode as soon as I made it on site, grabbed my scholar's book, and went over to the lake on my own and started writing about my experiences from the night before. And it was very meaningful for me.
And nobody else.
And nobody else. Now, is that appropriate? Of course it is. It's an appropriate thing, but it's not necessarily LARPing out loud. It is, the scene in that case is that very close-in piece. It has a purpose, right? I'm getting into character. I'm having meaningful role play. I'm only having it with myself. I'm not really involved with anyone else. Now, in this example, this did not happen, but in this example, what if Kieran, the dwarf, in the cornerstone that we had at the time, sees Bozarth having his very meaningful, idyllic experience on his own?
So now we have scene 2. We've gone from one person, and we have a wide shot. We have a lake, we have a person approaching. Bozarth, what are you writing? You look very interested. It looks very intense.
Kieran, well, this morning, and there were a lot of events last night, and I have to get them down on paper before all of the things that we talked about we're going to do today. And it's just a very beautiful time. It has me very retrospective. I'm trying to get this taken care of. We have I'm going to make something else up. The Fomorians are coming, and we have to take care of it. There's an event several times later. But
Well, tell me about what happened. I wasn't there, but now I want to know.
okay, so you get the idea of what we're talking about. Now that scene is pulled out, and now that is LARPing out loud. It's a small scene. It's a very small scene. And my actions that were very private initiated that scene, but we're still zoomed right in. Now, if we were having this piece and something larger came out, and Stephanie, without breaking the windows, could you give me a scream? Okay, so that widens the shot out larger, and there might be more role play to happen. What just happened? What is going on? Maybe all of Cornerstone wakes up to this part, and we go to investigate. So we're setting the scale for our role play when we LARP out loud. It's not just the fact that we are having the role play moment, which we are, we're doing those things, and we're being very vocal about them. We're being expressive, but we're also choosing the scale in which we want to interact. That might be because it might be a topic that is of a certain importance, or you can't let out, or that you're afraid. It's not, we don't want to be, information hoarders, but maybe we want to disseminate to a certain direction, or we want to get a piece going, or maybe we're plotting, or whatever it might be. That scale will vary versus a field fight, an overall field fight. So that camera might be all the way out. Yes, Jason?
Is it important to remember that regardless if it's a camera at this focus or a camera at this focus, that there's still an audience, that there's still a camera for the audience?
It is important, and I'm going to play yes and with you. In many ways, that focus is at every level depending on who the observer is. So while I might be having an individual scene, it might become a little larger because it's being seen by someone else. It might get even larger if it's an action that's going on in the middle of a larger portion. And as you pull out, because there's so many of us, there's that many different cameras going on. Each of our sets of eyes is a camera, and that scene size varies.
May I clarify?
Yeah, feel free.
Okay. For example, and I apologize, I'm horrible with names. Derek, when Derek came in and yelled, "Bozarth, I need to summon the spirit of Brittanis right now."
That seems certainly
If he
huge,
had,
right?
and that brought everyone going, huh? But if he had just walked up to you and said, "Bozarth, I need to summon the spirit of Brittanis right now,"
Right,
it might not have changed your reaction, Bozarth's reaction,
right.
but it wouldn't have drawn in all the other heroes to the event.
Correct. And the scale of that scene changes, absolutely. So,
Which affects the role play that you give, both physically, vocally, and emotionally. Because if I don't want everybody to know that's what I'm going to do, then I do come up and I do approach just this person. And my actions are a little smaller, my emotions are a little smaller, and I'm a little quieter because I'm intending for this to be a more intimate role play, but I'm not excluding anyone else intentionally. I am setting a scale of this is the person I'm involving, and if other people are around in here and get involved, then that's good.
I'm going to put myself in St. Michael's shoes for the moment. Not Michael, me, as in Michael, your character. And you see this called out, and it's on a less large scale. But you see it going on. You're still like one of the sets of cameras. And Jason, your character, Michael, may decide to get involved. What is going on here? That's something that I used to do all the time.
So go ahead.
How do you not, by going to him directly and not bringing in the rest of the audience, you say you're not excluding other people, but by going to him and talking to him quietly, in some ways you are, because it doesn't, if somebody's not actively noticing the two of you talking in the corner, they don't have the opportunity to interact. So is that really LARPing out loud, or is that just
It
the
is.
two of you?
And I'll give you a prime example. Everybody's seen Braveheart? Most everybody has seen Braveheart. The scene on the field where you have the Scots talking to the English before the battle. Okay? Everybody knows that scene. That's a small scene. They didn't want to involve the entire army. They didn't want all of the Scots listening. And Wallace decides he wants to be involved. He sees the scene. He's interested. He goes and he gets involved. Because he saw it. He's not being excluded. There's a scene that's been set by these actors, these players, and I'm not directly involving this person, but I'm not preventing this person from being involved either.
I'll get to you here in just a second, but I'm going to do a yes and on this piece. So your question was, is that not excluding? What it is choosing that audience at the time. It doesn't mean that it won't expand. It doesn't mean it won't contract. It doesn't mean it won't go away. It just means that's what the initial piece may be. It may blow up into something larger. And I see you'll be second after Mary, after I get talking. But your story, if you choose to be the one to come out, you are still LARPing out loud if you are sharing those pieces with other people. Really, even when I'm on my own doing my own soliloquy, if no one else saw me, it's really not LARPing out loud technically, but I'm in play, but it doesn't really get anywhere. The larger that pan out goes, the more effective that LARPing out loud becomes. You're gonna be third, Brad. Mary.
I was just gonna help with clarification, you got it. I was
Okay.
gonna say, the one thing I think that I did mostly with Bridget was I'd walk across the field, what are these two idiots talking about over here? And draw
Right.
attention to small. So
Right, she was using a verbal nuance in order to get that attention. The same kind of piece that I did as my Death Walker, right? I didn't want to bring attention to the fact that I was a nemesis walking into Cornerstone. That's not appropriate to suddenly call a battle. That's not what the purpose of him showing up was. The purpose of him showing up is walking straight to the warden and saying, "Warden, I need to speak to your shaman." And as a result, and this is actually a really great example of what you're talking about, is that it started small, but because it's like, what is going on? There's somebody here, they're moving with purpose, and suddenly that gets much larger as all the eyes start to go on what is this element that has changed, and what the heck is going on? And multiple role play moments happen, and it can get really big really fast if you wish for it to. Sorry, you were next?
Yes. So the way I'm going back to the example where you two were writing and you're coming up to what's that?
Then Brad, then Andy, just
Okay.
keep it sort of.
No, there's nothing stopping me from where you two are conversating. It's like, well, I heard something that pertains to that. Because like, well, you're telling it wrong. It actually happened like this from my perspective.
Right.
My eyes are the cameras of my story, and by bringing it to yours, it's expanding that scene even more out there. And that sort of
Right,
stuff. Is that
or if, for example, if Larissa's character rolls up as her scholar and doesn't engage at all, but suddenly is writing everything down that is being said, that's expanding the scope of that as well. Brad, you're next, then Andy, and then I think we'll move on unless there's more.
I was just gonna, so it seems like what you're saying is, the big takeaway here is, so if I come out and I see you by yourself writing in a book, I could, oh, he's writing in a book and go about my business, or I could go find out what you're doing. But I should never assume that just because someone's doing something private, that I'm excluded from it. It's all part of the game.
Correct.
And I have
Absolutely.
permission to get involved as long as they're doing it in
And even if I did, if it really was just my moment and I'm doing my thing, if I'm really using our culture as an example, if I'm over here on the side and doing my part and something comes in and you're actually for the role play intruding, I need to play yes and roll with that part as well. Well, no, I was doing nothing. You know, instead of me adding to that, I can actually say anything other than what I was actually doing. I can be.
But it's not okay for me to assume you don't want me involved. Like, I think a lot of us do that, and that's wrong,
It's
right?
an incorrect assumption to say that I am excluding you simply because I am existing over here in the corner,
Right.
and not talking with you. I am clickable, as Caroline would say. I'm part of the world, and you can come over and touch and see what happens, right? Chris actually had an
Andy had a
example.
question
Andy had a
first.
question first.
I kind of actually piggybacks off of Brad. This is very descriptive and very theoretical, and that's fun.
That's fine.
But I was trying to think of like, why? Like, what is our takeaway? I mean, is it that? Do you want every scene to involve all of Cornerstone?
Well, we're gonna.
I'm very much a sharer. So
It doesn't have to be, but what we're gonna actually do is practice here in a moment. That's why we're saving some time of what LARPing out loud looks like and how different it can be.
So
We're
it
gonna
seems
do
like
that
you're
in a moment.
saying it's all part of Cornerstone and we can be involved or not involved as much as we want.
Correct.
So,
Yes.
And you're next, but he
so
said idea.
the example that I have is actually twofold. It's two separate examples that stylize the same thing. It's both of Kieran's deaths. One, where the death rules were quiet, okay? And there was no LARP out loud for my death. And so I died quietly in the dark in some tall grass that was taller than I am, which isn't difficult to do,
Clarify.
but it existed. And
To
the
clarify,
rules
because of his
supported
death,
that.
this changed, but at the time, the rule was count your 60 seconds out quietly and don't talk.
You're dead.
And you're dead.
And so we changed those rules, and we made death a loud, LARP out loud item. And that's the key. LARP out loud starts with you. I LARP out loud so that Brad can get involved, Andy can get involved,
Quick
but that
clarification.
LARP out loud starts with me.
we have new
my
players
actions.
that don't know about death counts yet, probably.
That's
So-
fine. And
we'll get there.
we won't cover
This
those
is
rules. What's
before
important
you're
is that
dead,
there's a
and
LARP
while
out
you're
loud
bleeding out,
component to that.
you get
for
loud.
these.
So people
Do not go
Yeah.
quietly into that.
Don't bleed out quietly because we can't physically see blood gushing from your neck or whatever. Like, so
Well, and
yell
and
so people know something's going
in
on.
this case, in a large field fight, Kieran died anonymous, unknown,
Right.
quietly in a corner because he got separated from the group and hacked down out of nowhere. Right?
I went to do
Exactly.
a thing and help
Characters should
another
never die
hero
that way.
and died in between the two things.
Right. And we
And
changed the
that's
rule
what
because of
rules
it.
Right.
on your path.
But you shouldn't be because it caused the realization that we weren't allowing death to be a LARP out loud opportunity. And because it hadn't happened prior to that, it wasn't a realized gap in the way that that functioned.
And I'm going to use that piece to show how LARPing out loud, even when the thing that probably shouldn't have happened, where we were able to do a yes and a LARP out loud of, so the rules let him come back in and he's dead. And suddenly there's a large opportunity for shock and horror that someone died on the field unknown, quietly. And talking about it becoming a LARP out loud moment, the entire campfire was just first stunned, and then what do we need to do? How do we make this, in character, this horrible thing happened. Are there any others that are out there? It spurred a lot of action out of that. That's the whole idea of LARPing out loud. It's an additive experience. More than any other topic, it needs to be an additive experience for LARP out loud. The scale that you pick, where you pick your scale, may run out of your control at some point. You can choose where your starting point is, but you've got to keep rolling with it and being emotive and doing your stuff instead of just letting it be in your head. Stephanie, you had a question. Do you want to keep?
It's just a quick comment. We were talking about death. Oh, if you want to be by yourself, get off scene. Don't sit in the middle of Cornerstone and be by yourself.
Right.
If you want to have a moment by yourself, go find a quiet corner, an inconspicuous corner, and go be by yourself.
Sure.
Otherwise, we are going to assume, rightfully so, that you want to be part of the action. You want to have people come and talk to you.
All right, one last thing, and we're going to actually two things, and we're going to move on because he's got his other scene that you wanted to describe. But we got that covered. Okay.
That was the one.
The other thing is that we're not saying, let's say you're a priest of one of the three sisters, and you want to go, worship and do your thing and get into role play in that part. We're not saying don't do that. We're saying though that if you want it to be a LARP out loud moment, ask others if they wish to come worship with you, or ask others if they want to come do whatever. That is a positive part. My starting piece over here was meant as an example of what really LARPing out loud isn't. Even though it can become that, it's not. And then showing scale. So for a moment, let's talk about some things that we can do. Let's start with an exercise. I know that there are at least 2 actors in this group, 3 probably, that have done so professionally, semi-professionally. Have you heard the term flocking? you ever done a flocking exercise? Okay? If you feel comfortable in coming up and participating in this one, feel free. If you don't feel like standing up, that's fine, Jason. But come on up and we'll start. I'll be in the front. Everyone get relatively close, but not uncomfortably close nearby. Anyone who wants to participate.
Do you want me to film?
Yeah. So this is gonna be like a flock of birds, all right? So this is group behavior. Come on in close, flock. Flocks of birds are not spread out all over the place. We're gonna be flocking.
Ducks fly together.
We're gonna be like a flock of birds. All right, so what we're going to do is whoever is out in front, and that's why I'm starting this, whoever is out in front based on where our body position is facing is leading the flock. And the rest of us need to adjust what our emotions are to match what the person in front is doing. So I'll lead, and then at some point I'll say, like for example, I'll say I'm gonna turn to the right, and then whoever's furthest to the right, in this case, is that Sarah?
Yes.
So Sarah will wind up leading, or if Brad steps out and he becomes the person that's the furthest out in that direction, we'll follow that person, and you're gonna see some interesting things happen here. Okay, we ready? 3, 2, 1, start. All right, I'm gonna turn to the right. Now Sarah's in front, so we gotta follow Sarah.
Turning to the left.
Oh, you're in front.
I feel like we're doing the same.
Turning to the left.
We'll continue this. Okay, we're turning towards the wall apparently.
All right, you get the feel for that? I'm gonna abbreviate that because we're starting to run out of time. So you get a feel. We'll get synchronous, and this is a physical example of that LARPing out loud. But what really happens is if we all start getting in sync, the story starts to flow together. We start working together to make that happen. What's that?
It becomes organic.
It becomes organic. It becomes, and you notice how we loosened up too. Even in that short little time, if we had more time to do it for longer, you'd see that we would become even more anticipatory of what those are as we look, keep our eyes on that, on who's the next person who's going to be in front, or what direction are they moving. We stop saying which direction we're going to go, those kinds of things. So the next piece is that I want to talk about here is, all right, this is going to be an all-group piece, and we can do it whether we're sitting or whether we're standing. Let's do this. What we're going to do is a full group milling about exercise, okay? Let's see. You're going to run into the next person as if you're afraid of them. You're going to run into them as if you are suspicious of whoever it is that you're talking to. Brad, you'll be in love with whoever you run into. I'm sorry, I didn't catch Josh, you will be, the people you run into are friends that you haven't seen in years, okay? You're going to be filled with joy to see everybody that you run into. Derek, you will be, I'm not going to use this term, you're going to be perturbed at whoever wants to talk to you. Jason, if you wish to, you can do this even while you're sitting down. You are going to use as if anyone that's talking to you has been hired to kill you. And Andy, you have to deliver news about the death of one of these people that are in here. And then everyone else just riff off of who you need to talk to. And we're just gonna do this is giving us an opportunity to LARP out loud based on those traits. Feel out however else you want to go about it. But let's go ahead and get up and mill around, and 3, 2, 1, action.
Got the coast? Okay. All right. Hands where I can see him.
I haven't seen you forever. Where have you been?
Avoiding the assassins. How have you been?
I've been doing fairly well. It's been a long time, so it's good looking. Well, it's good to see you again. I'm going to go around here and see some other people around here.
Let's use those skills that we've talked about and learned here.
We watch a movie, cuddle on the couch, maybe Netflix and chill. Just
Hands on heart.
working out.
They got this other thing.
Oh, you want me to go with you? I'd love to.
Why would you think I would want to?
That's good.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
You're trying to tell me.
I like being alive.
Yes, and I do well, so.
All right. And cut scene. Okay, unfortunately, we're running out of time. But did you get a feel of how that became an additive situation at that point? Using your skills, using a single personality trait, and interestingly enough, we have a term called Neptunes that even if there's no other piece going on, give someone what they love, what they hate, and some quirk, and you've got an NPC, and we can run with that immediately at that point, right?
Yeah.
So, love, hate, something weird, go. And you've got an action.
That should be a
there
total
we go.
roll sheet that we roll before we go on.
Right. All right, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you.